Okay, hello 150 students. This week we're going to be examining issues of race and racial inequality in our society. And I have a pretty good couple of readings for this week, and I hope you do them and take them seriously. I'm going to divide the lectures into two lectures this week. This is the first one, and the title of this one is really the myth of race. And let me share the screen here. So here is a definition of race. Race is a socially defined category based on real or perceived biological differences between groups of people. There are some kind of key physical differences that people in our world have: skin color, facial features, maybe the texture and color and quality of hair, height, things of that nature. The most important physical difference when we talk about race and racism and so on is skin color. And that's what I'm going to focus on in this brief lecture about race. And so historically, people have attached kind of meaning to skin color, as if certain people with certain skin color also have, or that is linked to kind of the quality of who they are in terms of their intelligence, maybe, or in terms of other abilities that they might have, artistic abilities, and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, number one, these perceived differences have been used to oppress groups of people based on their skin color. And that, of course, is the whole problem here. Now, when we look again at this definition, it's socially defined. And so I want you to really think about that word socially defined. Because while the physical differences might be real, skin color is certainly a real difference between people in our world, but what skin color kind of means to society is something that is socially defined. And we have found that these social meanings that we've given to skin color are basically false. They're based on, in most instances, the interests of powerful groups who are able to, or who have an interest in oppressing and exploiting people. And race or skin color becomes an easy way for them to do that. It becomes an easy way to attach meaning to a physical difference, in this case, skin color, which justifies how they're treated. There's a great quote that you may hear in certain places. I remember one of my sociology instructors when I was an undergraduate student using this quote quite a bit, and it kind of has resonated with me for quite a while. And I think that this quote really illustrates how, race has been incorrectly and unjustly used for centuries to exploit people. So there is only one race, and that is the human race. And as I'll get into in a second, this is what the biology shows. Those who study genes, those who study chromosomes, and all of that stuff have found that there really is very little difference between people, and that there is no such thing as race. So in other words, there is, for people with a certain skin color, there is no gene that says, okay, this skin color is linked to intelligence or anything else. So very nice quote. There is only one race, the human race. And maybe one day society will no longer have to, try to impart meaning on skin color, and that these misperceptions and lies and so on will one day evaporate or disappear, and we'll no longer have them. So when we get into an official definition of racism, it is the belief that all members of each race possess characteristics or abilities specific to that race, especially so as to distinguish it as inferior or superior to another race or races. So the clear example is how oftentimes people with white skin have supported the idea and grasped the idea and spread the idea that people with dark skin are somehow inferior, and that kind of justifies their actions. They're also at the same time saying that white skin color is linked to superior kinds of human traits and abilities. And again, this is proven to be factually false. The science has undermined these kinds of beliefs. Now, one of the there's a guy named Samuel Morton. He is known as the father of scientific racism. And talking briefly about him underscores how even people who used to call themselves scientists went to great lengths to try to prove that there were differences, that there were racial differences between species or races of humans, and that these differences could be linked to intelligence and those kinds of things. So here's an example of one of those guys. There was many people who tried to prove that there was a connection between race and intelligence. And this was Samuel Morton. And I think this goes back a couple hundred years ago, 150 years ago, which really in the scope of things is not that long ago. It was, you should bear in mind, at a time when we didn't know a lot about genes and genetic structure and all that kind of stuff, which has been a relatively recent. So what this guy did is he collected the skulls of thousands of different people who had been deceased, and he had known what he said was race based on primarily skin color. And then he did all kinds of studies with the skulls, measurements, how big were they, how much volume was there inside the skull, and so on and so forth. And through all of this quote unquote scientific research, he claimed to make a discovery that he could predict what races were inferior and what races were superior. And of course, as a science, his work has been for a long time now been proven to be false, and to be based on incorrect, false assumptions and a number of other things. So genetic research, which has really advanced tremendously in the last few decades, has shown two important things that I want to emphasize here. And this is emphasized in one of the readings that we have for this week too, is that all human beings are closely related. In other words, if you look at our genetic makeup, we're very much the same. There's not a lot of difference in our genetic makeup. So whether you have dark skin or white skin, or you're tall or you're short, or you have a different hair texture, different looking facial features, you know, these are really insignificant. These are really very slight differences because we share so much of the same genes and genetic makeup. So I think that's really interesting and profound. And then another important point is that in reality, if you go back in history, when I say go back in history, go back a couple 100,000 years when humans first appeared on the Earth's surface, we first appeared on the Earth's surface in Africa. And over the course of centuries, human beings migrated out of Africa into other parts of the world. So technically, we're all Africans. And that's kind of something that sounds maybe absurd, or it's hard to get your mind around. But that's what the science shows. That's what the history shows. You know, people who study this kind of thing are referred to, or they call themselves paleontologists or biologists. It might include historians who try to look at the origins of human beings, anthropologists. So there's people by different titles who study the origins of humans. And of course, now today we have genetic researchers, geneticists. So all of these different kind of scholarly specializations come into play here in studying this kind of thing. This is, I think, a fascinating picture here. I'm taking this directly from one of our readings that we had this week that appeared in the magazine National Geographic a couple of years ago. And if you look at the top of the PowerPoint slide here, you'll see it says the DNA profiles of these two are nearly 99% the same. And why is this so interesting? It just strikes me as very interesting. It shows that just one thing it shows, that's small differences in DNA can make up for some big differences in our physical differences. Let me read the bottom passage here. After our pre-human ancestors shed most of their body hair, we evolved highly visible differences in skin color. Tiny tweaks to our DNA account for them. Dark pigmentation would have helped our ancestors cope with the intense African sun. When humans migrated out of Africa into low sunlight regions, lighter skin became advantageous. Okay, so this passage here is directly from the reading that we had for this week. Now, one of the points here, and I hope you watch the video that we have for this week, because in the video they talk about differences in skin color and how that occurred. So basically, as humans, we kind of adapt to our environment. And because humans first originated in Africa, where the climate is very hot and humans are exposed to high intensity heat and sunlight, that humans developed this darker skin color, they call it a kind of a pigmentation, or there's a word for it, melanin, I think is the chemical, and it helps to protect people from the intense rays of the sun. So how that happens, how the DNA changes and leads to people having dark skin, is a fascinating thing. I don't completely understand it, but it has to do with the concept of evolution, that we have all of these DNA and they are sometimes making random changes in our physical makeup. And so those who had the darker skin color tended to survive because they had more protection from the sun. So the video, I think the speakers and the video that we have for this week probably can do a better job of explaining that than I can. It is interesting if you just go to Sweden. People have white skin color primarily, and Sweden is far removed from the equator. There's not much sunlight, and there's much less of a threat to getting skin cancer and other problems associated with the sun. The closer you move to the equator and go to Africa, people have black skin color. And it's for this historical reason that goes back tens of thousands of years, and how people's skin color kind of has changed over time. Here's a map also from this week's readings, which just gives you a visual kind of look and understanding of the migration of humans out of Africa and into different regions of the world. And as they migrated, and again, this is over thousands of years, right? We're talking thousands of years. Humans did develop different kind of physical traits. And again, if we think of skin color as the most obvious and outstanding feature, that people who moved north over time develop lighter skin color. And it may have been, the lighter skin color may have been because lighter skin color can better absorb more vitamin D from the sun. So when people do get exposed to the sunlight, their body's taking advantage of it and absorbing more vitamin D. So again, they talk about that in the film and a little bit more with some real experts on this question. Okay, so I think that's all I had. Pretty short lecture on race, but I hope you will just kind of connect this to the readings in the video, and that's all for now.